I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Dungeon Master Q&A. Today we are once again joined by our guest Bad Data. We are going to be going over another question from the forum today, Bad Data. It is a plot twist necessary in Dungeons and Dragons? I feel like it's hard to accomplish because players are almost always expecting one. I'm curious to hear people's opinions. So, obviously, this is kind of a multifaceted topic here. So, how about we bounce it back and forth between us? First, you just go ahead and answer the question, and then I'll give my opinion on the answer to the question, and then we'll dig a little bit more into like some of the deeper philosophy of what this question entails.
Yeah. So average, obvious opener for me is I have a very permissive, anything goes attitude, anything to make sure the players have fun. But as a facet of that, I also view no individual component of a game as strictly speaking necessary. So I don't believe any plot has to have a twist. If the players have fun, well, they have fun. Whether or not they're the kind of players who have fun with a twist or without a twist is dependent on the game.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm pretty much in that same lane of thinking. I guess the person here is asking specifically, is a plot twist necessary in Dungeons and Dragons? Because I think that if you're playing certain games, certain things are expected. For instance, I do believe that if you're playing in a World of Darkness game, there is some level of like betrayal and intrigue that is expected. I do believe that if you're playing in a Call of Cthulhu game, there is some amount of um, like messing with the players, horror themes and all of that is expected. So those are necessary components of the game, but I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you say that Dungeons and Dragons covers so much ground, as far as what you can do in the game, that and so many themes that there is no one right answer about like, oh, this has to be in a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Um, I think the thing that comes closest to that would be combat, and even that I would argue is not necessary in some games where they don't feel the need to run combat because they have enough fun, doing the role playing and the exploration and everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we are in agreement that no, plot twists are not a necessary thing in Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
But now, let's move on to the second part about this and get into some of the philosophy of this, because they go on to say that they feel that it's hard to pull off because players are almost always expecting one. So let me start this, segue into this part of it by asking you a question here. Um, are you expecting a plot twist as a player, in various games, not necessarily just mine, but in any of the games you play in, are you expecting a plot twist? And like a part B to that is, are you expecting one because that's what you want, are you expecting one because that's what DMs think that players want, and so therefore you know that there's going to be one because the DM's trying to, you know, fulfill your expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is an important distinction.
So, yeah, I mean, are you expecting a plot twist?
Me? No. I never go into a game expecting something like that. Then I don't go into many games expecting a lot of anything. It's just how I prioritize as a player. I think of games mostly in a I make things happen sense. What happens to me is incidental and I work around that. That's not how everybody thinks of
Fair
it.
enough. Yeah. No, absolutely. And so that was going to be my follow up to that. Then was, you know, amongst your fellow players, do you feel that there's an expectation of a plot twist?
No, but for different reasons. Generally with the groups I've both GM'd for and played with, there isn't an expectation of like an actual real plot twist per se. If it's very how would I say? If it's very I'm looking for the word. It's like common. Not God. Anyway, if a plot twist seems like it in a situation, it seems like a sort of thing where it's always going to happen, in a short-term story, um like the I think the most common version of what I'm trying to articulate is, if you're a player and you're playing a machismo guy, a common joke is if you ever find a girl who's into you, that's because the upset is the GM has thrown a succubus at you and you're gonna get attacked by it. Sort
Right.
of short-term common, twists like that are expected, but grand upheavals in the overarching plot are not looked for generally, is what I get.
Okay. Yeah. Well, was the word you were looking for trope, by the way?
Yeah, I was looking for a word like trope. There were like 3 different words I could have used and I couldn't think of any of them.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that there is a certain amount of the trope of you know, if a beggar child comes up to you, he's a thief. You know, if the king hires you to go do a job, he's the secret big bad evil guy. You know, like I do think that there are certain tropes to all of that, that do get carried out quite a bit, and so players can kind of see those coming, you know, from a mile away. I think that's really like the most common thing that you'll find when it comes to plot twist is those tropes of like, you know, a woman who comes onto you and it's really a succubus, or you know, stuff like that. Although I don't know that I really classify those as quote unquote plot twists.
Yeah, that's the thing that was hard to articulate about that plot, is that it mostly covers really short-term or very obvious things. Some of them are plot twists, but some of them aren't. But they are the kind of things players are going to call on.
Right.
And whether or not that's actually a good or bad thing is up to a matter of perspective. Because on one hand, absurding expectations is nice. It can also lead to certain uncomfortabilities, whereas falling into a trope is technically a type of following of conventional writing norms, which is not an intrinsically bad thing as a GM.
Absolutely. I mean, the fantasy that Dungeons and Dragons is built off of is, you know, where many of these tropes come from. So, you know, using them in your game is absolutely almost a part of the game, you know. That being said, I do feel as though, the more you subvert expectations, the more that becomes the expectation. So if you are throwing plot twists into where your players are just, like starting to guess, like, okay, what's the twist? As soon as you introduce a scenario, if the first thing your players are trying to figure out is how you're tricking them and what the twist is, you're probably using, too many plot twists and need to back off from that a little bit. That being said, players are jaded, and I have groups that, will never take anything at face value, despite me very rarely like straying too far from the clues that I drop along the way. Like, if everything points to vampires, like, I'm probably not sending giant mosquitoes at you.
Yeah. I'd like to comment on the other thing you said about how if your players are always expecting a twist, it's time to back off. I'd like to point out, in context, if twists become the norm, backing off will be the next twist, where things go exactly as they should and they get punched in the gut for it.
Yes, yes, and that's pretty much, my point about this is, if your players are not expecting a twist, then throwing a good twist in there is great, and they are like, oh my god, we did not see that coming, and it's this great RPG moment. But if they're expecting a twist all the time, then exactly like you said, throwing something straight forward at them and letting them second guess everything and get in their own way because they're trying to figure out what the twist is. Sometimes the bad guy is just bad, and he really is the bad guy, and the guy who hired you really is the good guy, and there's no mystery to be solved here, Scooby Doo. You just got to go unmask old Mr. Jenkins, and your players can spend an entire session or more, getting in their own way because it can't be that straightforward, and yet it is.
Yeah.
And once you do that, now you can really keep them guessing because, you know, the next time they're expecting a twist, go straight forward again, you know, and then they're like, okay, now the DM who threw a twist at us every time has gone straight forward twice in a row. For sure, this next thing's a twist. Nope, straight forward again. And then subvert their expectations again after they are like, okay, we must have hit a different phase of the campaign and everything is more straightforward, and then throw another twist at them. Keep your players guessing. If it ever becomes a expectation of, okay, we know the DM is going to do this or that, it's time to start mixing it up more, is all I'm trying to say.
Yes. Oh, and finally, when plotting out things that are a bit complex, remember the final advice: there's always Hendersons out there. Get ready for the twist to be that the players did something you didn't expect.
Absolutely. And, DMs, like, don't rack your brains trying to come up with the perfect twist when a lot of times your players are going to give you way better ideas in their paranoia as they sit there and try to figure out what's going on. You introduce a sketchy NPC and just make something mysterious about them, and then listen as the players discuss what it could possibly be. You might come up with some good ideas based off of their own fears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that is a fun bit of stuff. As per usual, chances are players aren't familiar with every combination of writing techniques and literary theory that exists across all of fiction. So if you're looking for ideas and aren't a wondrous writer yourself, you can always probably look something up online as a final bit of advice.
Absolutely, and just to piggyback off of that real quick, you can also do exactly what most writers do and take actual events, actual historical events, and just change them up a little bit. You know, make it a son instead of an uncle. Make it, you know, a wife instead of a daughter. Make it, you know, like take an actual event, change it just enough to make it your own, and use that as the basis for your plot twists and your story writing, and you can really you know, keep your players guessing quite a bit that way, while also incorporating realism and what real writers do. So yeah, that pretty much sums up what I and Bad Data. Was that everything you had to say on the subject?
That I think that covers about everything I can articulate about the question, such as it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, we want to, you know, thank you guys for submitting your questions, and we want to thank anyone who's watching. And as always, everyone, good gaming.